little bit about Sonoma Land Trust. We are a local nonprofit. We protect land in Sonoma County for everyone's benefit. We've been doing this work since 1976, and we've protected over 60,000 acres in our county so far. We accomplish our work through the generosity of our members and contributors, so thank you to all of you out there who are helping us protect beautiful Sonoma County for future generations. As we pursue our mission of conserving land in Sonoma County, we recognize that we stand upon the unceded ancestral lands of many indigenous peoples. We honor their knowledge, care, and stewardship of this special place across the ages and acknowledge the deep and lasting damage that colonization has inflicted on them. We embrace our responsibility to learn from and protect their cultural and traditional connections to the land. Dr. Quinton Martins is the founding partner of True Wild and the principal investigator of Living with Lions, a community conservation project centered around San Francisco's North Bay mountain lion population. Dr. Martins is the former founder and CEO of Cape Leopard Trust, a predator conservation NGO based in South Africa. He has 30 years of field experience, having worked in wilderness areas throughout much of Africa, the Middle East, and the USA. After working as a safari guide for 10 years, Dr. Martin turned to studying predators in 2003. He completed his PhD, The Ecology of Leopards in the Cedarburg Mountains, South Africa, through the University of Bristol, UK, in 2010. Dr. Martins, welcome. We're so glad to have you as a presenter this evening.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Excellent. Well, it's a great opportunity for me to have to share more about our work here in the North Bay. So thank you. So as mentioned in the introduction, my background, I really kind of started out more in the field working as a safari guide and managing camps in some pretty wild places in Africa, and got to work with these amazing cats like leopards and African lions, tracking them out in the field, and really got to see after about 8 or 10 years of doing that, realized that I wanted to redirect my efforts to actually do something to protect these wilderness areas that these cats needed in order to live, and ended up then moving on to going back to study a degree in zoology as a so-called mature student, and started up this organization which was focused very much on protecting leopards in the Cape in South Africa in the mountains, and combining the project with a robust scientific study, which we would then use the information to share with the public. About 11 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago, I moved over to the States with my family, and I set up the Living with Lions project in Sonoma and in the North Bay, and it was quite interesting because my ideas about mountain lions were quite different coming from South Africa to what I experienced over here, and I thought that this presentation, this webinar, it's a really good opportunity to share more about how mountain lions are able to exist in the North Bay, but also to kind of give you a sense of what a mountain lion is, what kind of animal it is, because as I said, it's just very different to what I had thought coming from South Africa. So what is a mountain lion? If we go back like 10 or 12,000 years ago. I think one of the things that strikes me most is, kind of getting a feel for, who mountain lions were sharing the landscape with at the time. And at that stage, there were these really large predators around, a lot of megafauna. But, in the cat field, you had these really large cats, like the American lion, for example, that coexisted with mountain lions at the time. An American lion was like about an 850 pound beast. Um, and, if you take mountain lions, a male mountain lion being, say, about 150 pounds, um, one can imagine it's almost like mountain lions and bobcats living in the same area with that sort of size difference. And one can only imagine that as mountain lions kill and eat bobcats on a regular basis here in California or in within their range. Um, these American lions and the saber-toothed cats and all the bigger cats would have done the same with mountain lions living in the same area. So I imagine mountain lions as a very timid sort of predator. We all know they're incredibly capable and are amazing predators, as are all cats in their own right. But in terms of their character, they were navigating this landscape, kind of always looking over their shoulders, worried about being attacked or killed by something bigger. And when all of these large predators, including mountain lions for that matter, went extinct in North America somewhere around 10,000 years ago, um, mountain lions were left to move back to North America sometime later, only to find that all those big cousins, if you like, were not around. So suddenly they were suddenly the apex predator in this environment. But to me, it seems that they still carry that evolutionary baggage of being a rather timid predator. And genetically, mountain lions are most closely related to cheetah. It kind of makes sense, that from just in terms of their character, they're pretty similar. Um, so I just thought that it's a good thing to kind of understand where they come from. They are big cats, but they don't really have the same temperament of a lion or a leopard or a jaguar for that matter. Um, you know, and I think it's always good to know that when wandering around. Yeah. So a little more about understanding how these mountain lions live in the North Bay. One of the tools, these cats are incredibly elusive. So how does one study an animal that you hardly ever get to see? How do we get to understand more about them other than fleeting glimpses or finding them, in a trap somewhere or, you know, it's it's incredibly hard to imagine how we can glean sufficient information on their ecology and movements and breeding behavior and all these things, and without having some kind of special tools. One of the tools are these trail cameras, which have become incredibly useful, especially since they've been digitized. When I started my leopard study in South Africa years back, we were still using film trail cameras. And nowadays, these new trail cameras are just brilliant. So the trail camera is put out in the field and it acts as an observer 24/7, rain or shine. It's collecting data on the movement of any animals that move in front of it. And once we gather those data, if we're looking specifically at mountain lions, one of the things that we're able to easily determine would be the activity of mountain lions. So if you want to know, this is taking a really pretty large database of or sample of mountain lion photographs taken by these trail cameras in the North Bay, and you can kind of get a sense of when mountain lions are most active. One of the things that you might notice is that mountain lions do move around during the day, so it's not an anomaly to see or know of a mountain lion moving around during the day. But they certainly don't move around anywhere as much, sort of from 8 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, for example. Um, their key periods are that they move around are at night. And if you really want to avoid a mountain lion, perhaps going out at noon might be the thing. But certainly, going out at 8 o'clock in the evening seems to be a good time if you're keen on getting to see one active and out and about. We took these photographs and these data, and we also kind of wanted to have a look at, I think, getting a sense of whether there was a difference between mountain lion activity in private versus public areas. And, um, you know, are mountain lions avoiding getting seen by people on their properties by being more nocturnal? Well, the evidence here seems to show to some degree that they are more nocturnal, on private properties than they are in the open space parks that we surveyed, like Jack London and the regional parks, for example, that they seem to move. They were prepared to move around a little bit more during the day in these open space areas, which I thought was quite interesting to pick up. But if we really want to get a sense of what mountain lions are doing and how they live in this landscape, the GPS collars using satellite GPS have really opened our eyes up to how mountain lions are living and moving around in this landscape. It's just an incredible tool, to be able to take a deep dive into what these secretive cats are doing. Sitting behind my computer, being able to actually get those data and then work with it, because you just don't get to see these cats. So the first thing, of course, is that you have to catch them. So, you know, capturing mountain lions is not an easy task. One of the ways we do it is by baiting. We use roadkill deer that the public, Caltrans, Sheriff's Department, several, many people call me, for example, if they see a fresh roadkill deer, put those out in the field and then bait the mountain lions. The other way is using a trap that I designed, which was an electronic trap that was very selective. It measures the height of the animal going through the trap, and you don't use bait at all. You just put the trap on a pathway. In fact, this photograph was taken on one of the Sonoma Land Trust properties, and we managed to catch a mountain lion in this trap. But it's kind of like just a tunnel trap, and the animal walks along a trail, walks through the trap, and then the trap will trigger if it goes through. But smaller animals like this guy over here just goes through without triggering the trap because the sensors on the trap detect that it's smaller than our target species, which would be a bigger mountain lion. Then along comes the mountain lion. Well, there you have it. Caught and ready for processing. Once we respond, well, pretty much immediately when a mountain lion is trapped to place a collar on the animal. we're able to age these cats from their teeth, the wear on their teeth, um, which helps us. Let's have a look at what these cats are doing here. So with the GPS collars, once we placed one of these GPS collars on the cat, um, we program it to take points usually every 2 hours throughout the day and night. So um, one one would get, you know, up to 12 points a day, essentially showing us where the cat has been moving. And when you take a whole lot of these data from all the different cats that we've collared, you kind of get with like a map like this where you overlay the GPS locations from different individuals in an area, and you can kind of see roughly the extent to which we've collared mountain lions in the North Bay. Um, the we've collared 36 cats now since October 2016. And the map here doesn't show all of them, but it kind of gives you a good representation of what we have. So mountain lions, the way it works with their territories, this is an example of a male mountain lion with the yellow points. That's one single individual, one male mountain lion, P5, whose range extended all the way from sort of Mark West Springs all the way down to Napa and on Sonoma Mountain and that whole region. And the idea with these cats is that a male would have like a really large territory of maybe 150 to 250 square miles. And then within his territory, he would have a number of females, and they would each have territories of, say, 30, 40, or 50 square miles. So those are the green points over there are the territory for a female mountain lion P1, and the purple P4 in the Napa region. So that's kind of what it looks like once we get a number of points over a period of time. So the last time I did a talk with the Sonoma Land Trust was about 3 years ago. And in fact, it was almost to the day 3 years ago. And at the end of my talk, while I was doing questions, we actually had one of my traps triggered um, with a mountain lion caught in it. And my wife, Liz, had to take over answering the questions. And we caught and collared this female, a young female P41 um, in Napa. And I thought I'd just share the range of this particular female. So being a young female, we put a collar on that has a remote drop-off device that dropped off after 8 months. So after 8 months, the collar sort of releases and fell off, and those are the data that we were able to get from her for the 8 months that we had her collared. Now, this is an animation, and I hope it doesn't mess up our internet um, on the screen, but it will give you an idea. Kind of imagine this is a male mountain lion in the West, Sonoma West County. Gives you an idea of how they move through the landscape, um, and this is essentially moving kind of every second. It would be like a day or 2 days of movement. So let's have a look. So it's kind of tracking, and it's not always along those specific lines, but it's connecting the dots between where the cat's been. So we're following, this is over a 3 month period where kind of tracking what this mountain lion is doing, and you end up using similar routes sometimes, but what he's trying to do is mark his territory and kind of keep an eye out to make sure no other male mountain lions come into his region. These cats don't want to share their territories with anyone else. The males in particular, if any other males move into this area, there would be a threat of them killing the cubs of the females that are within his territory, which is one of the key reasons why he wants to keep them out. So, what are mountain lions looking out for here? And this would not be the same as if you were tracking mountain lions in New Mexico or um, in more arid regions, for example. But in the North Bay, a really good proxy for mountain lion habitat selection would be looking at these dark green areas on this is a really good representation of, what mountain lions are selecting for. When we've taken all of our data and put it on a satellite image, something like 95% of the points fall on these dark green areas, which represent bushy, shrubby areas with a lot of vegetation, versus the open light green areas, which represent grassland or vineyards in some cases. But essentially, mountain lions select for areas with cover so that they can ambush their prey, hunting deer, without them seeing them, and then also, using it as an opportunity of not being detected. So having a thick vegetation to hide in, for example. So if you really want to know, if you're living in an area with mountain lions, and this is specific really to like it works really well in the North Bay, for example, and may not be a good proxy in a desert area like Arizona or New Mexico, um, because they don't have the extent of trees. But where we are, the dark green really is a good representation of excellent mountain lion habitat. So if we sort of draw boundaries around what I would think would be really good mountain lion habitat, this is kind of what you end up with. In between these areas are mountain lions can move in between these areas. It's just that they don't really want to hang around in these areas for too long. They kind of scoot around and they'll use whatever thick vegetation is available. Maybe they'll move along a creek where there's vegetation along that creek. Um, when you've got a male mountain lion who has a big range, sometimes that range would extend beyond, um, you know, over big roads like Highway 12, for example. So this is P13 in the Santa Rosa region, going all the way down to the 116. His range covered that whole Sonoma Mountain area, Annandale, but also went over Highway 12, um, which is, the females were not, territorial females were not doing that, but the males, because their ranges are so big, kind of extended beyond things like roads. But what we found was, what was really interesting was that he would only use specific crossing points to to get from one place to another, um, which is really cool to see. And we're working on a paper with our partners, All Hands Ecology, with Scott Jennings, looking at a mountain lion crossings and roads paper, which is really fascinating stuff to see how they use roads in the area. The younger cats, uh, you know, are have a different kind of modus operandi. They're kind of avoiding the key mountain lion areas because they're trying to avoid the adult mountain lions. And this is an example of a recently collared male who's just literally walked up to Highway 101 last night. So this is a pretty recent map. He started out in Sebastopol and went north, um, and then came back down again, and then sort of headed east. And who knows where he's going to be tomorrow? But I suspect that he's gone across Highway 101 using Mark West Creek as a corridor. So again, even though this is an incredibly perturbed landscape, these cats are able to navigate it, and this is where the GPS collars are so valuable, giving us insight and looking through the eyes of a mountain lion, how they see how the landscape is connected. So these creeks and these vegetated areas, areas with natural vegetation are incredibly important for wildlife. So if mountain lions can move along there, you can imagine that other wildlife could do the same. As a result, we've been looking at some of these crossing points, like on Highway 12. This is at Stewart Creek at Sonoma Land Trust's Glen Oaks property, kind of discussing with Caltrans and working with other partners to see whether we can improve the structures um, around these roads to allow for wildlife to be able to move through more freely, especially in winter, for example, where if there's water in in these culverts, um, do the mountain lions then have to cross over the road, most likely, which means that there's a higher risk of them being hit or struck by a car. Using the GPS collars, we've been able to establish what mountain lions are eating in the North Bay. So, how do they live? How do they eke out a living in this place? What do they do? And, deer are absolutely the most preferred prey item for mountain lions. Um, the this last year, for example, the data just for the year, mountain lions were eating like almost 90% of their diet was deer. But overall, it's about 75%. And then livestock, small livestock in particular, goats and sheep, form an unfortunately high percentage. Um, and I, would like to add that those livestock would be considered unprotected livestock because they were accessible to mountain lions at the time. House cats or domestic cats um, or feral cats end up being 3 to 4% of their diet that we know, and I think that's an underestimate, frankly, because the the way that we find these kills and the way that we determine the diet of the mountain lions is by finding clusters of GPS locations. So when we're tracking the cat, we monitor what they're doing, and if we see a whole bunch of points together, so if the collar's taking points every 2 hours, that means that 12 points would be 24 hours. So if you get a bunch of points together in close proximity to each other, it suggests the mountain lion was staying in one place, one small place for a long time. What was it doing? Well, it could be resting, but most likely if it spent that long there, it was feeding on something. This is a really cool example of how mountain lions use day bedding sites. So if you look at the map here or this image, you'll see that they're stars points on the northern side. You've got a whole bunch of star points, and then circles down at the bottom. So the circles are daytime points, and the stars are nighttime points. So what the mountain lion's done is the 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 GPS location that's marked there was at 10 o'clock at night. So somewhere between 10 o'clock at night and 12 o'clock that night, it went along and killed something near that house and then fed on it during the night. And then the next day went in the morning, cached the kill, and then went to go hang out away from the kill in another place right through the day. And then when it got dark, went back to the site to feed, to continue feeding. And mountain lions would do this on a regular basis until the carcass is fully consumed. So maybe it could be 3 or 4 days sometimes for a fully grown deer to be consumed by a mountain lion. So every time during the day they'll go off, or almost every time they'd go off to a day bedding site that could be, up to a mile away from where they made the kill, um, and then go back and feed at night. Just to give you a sense of, how we really are living with lions. This is a recent image um, of a mountain lion that made a deer kill right next to this property on Sonoma Mountain. and fed on it for 4 days. So she was in those bushes, 30 yards away from the house, and would come back at night and feed on the carcass, feed on the remains every night, and then go off during the day somewhere else and rest up, and then you know come back at night again. And it's just fascinating to see how they habituated to the fact that they have no choice but to be able to be close to people in this area. Because when you look at a parcel layer of a mountain lion's territory here in Sonoma, it's just it's incredible to see that one mountain lion's territory could have 10 or 15 or even 17,000 private land parcels within its territory. So these cats are constantly moving over people's properties every day, all the time. They don't really have a choice. Um, the amount of open space available to them here is simply not extensive enough for them to be able to live in on open space land only. They live, they're living mostly on private land, on these private land parcels. So they're trying to avoid people at the same time, but because there are just so many people, they're bound to get seen at some point, especially with security cameras and ring cameras and things like that. But essentially, they don't really have an option. They're using good mountain lion habitat, but so are people using good mountain lion habitat and have encroached in that space. So most of those properties, I would venture to say that most of those properties have some sort of fencing. Um, Mountain lions don't have, an issue with fencing in that they can jump 15 feet high. I mean, there aren't many fences in Sonoma that will keep a mountain lion out. And here you can see, a vineyard fence that a mountain lion, this male P5 pops up and over in a flash. No big deal. 8 foot, that's nothing, right? So, mountain lions don't have an issue with fences, but their prey do. And this is, a deer that's been caught by a mountain lion up against a fence. Um, and and the mountain lions are, in fact, we believe, benefiting from the fences in that we're finding a lot of kills associated with fences, so that they appear to be running the deer into the fences or using the fences to their advantage when they're hunting um, their main prey, which are deer. Fencing in our area, is pervasive. Not only do you have perimeter fencing, but you've got other broken down fences lying around. You've got fencing, all sorts of different kinds of fences. So one of the key things that concerns me in this area is that we can't really understand how deer populations are doing here because of the extent of all the private properties and the fact that we don't know what kind of fencing these private properties have. Are they excluding deer completely by putting a perimeter deer fence around the entire property, even though there's natural vegetation there? Or are deer able to move from one property to the next? We simply don't know. Something that we're really trying to get more information on. But we would love to be able to see, like these old fences getting taken out because they simply don't serve any purpose. Um, the GPS collars have allowed us into the world of, mountain lions breeding uh, behavior and getting a sense of what the survival rates of mountain lions are as a result. So when a mountain lion, if you ever want to know what a mountain lion call sounds like, this is a mountain lion looking for a mate. So, we have this is a cat wall that you could hear.
Unfortunately, we didn't actually hear the cat. Maybe we can return to that at the end of the presentation.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, mountain lions are not very vociferous. They do this caterwauling um, when they're mating, and if they're successful with their whole breeding cycle and bringing their young up, that could be only every 2 years or 18 months or something like that. So people that hear mountain lions calling on a weekly basis on their properties must realize that those are not mountain lions. It's most likely a fox or something else like that, which makes some really odd calls. But mountain lions, really the only sounds you hear from them are mostly communication between the mom and their kittens, often bird-like chirping calls and that sort of thing, which are not very loud so that they avoid drawing attention to themselves, or that caterwauling sound, which is only heard occasionally when the females, particularly when the females looking um, for a male. And the other way that the main form of communication is through scent marking on the ground. So scrapes that they have scent glands on their feet, and then and they scrape and urinate in a place which then communicates with other mountain lions what's going on in their lives, their Facebook posts, if you like. So, so using the GPS collars, here we have a great instance where we're watching on the same day or over 2 days or whatever, we're watching a female and a male mountain lion find each other and meet at 12 p.m. In Annandale and then go off together. And for the next few days, they were moving around together where we could watch the GPS locations overlaid exactly with each other, and that gives us an indication that they're mating. And all we need to do is to map or to diarize that and look out for signs or behavior 90 to 98 days later, somewhere in that window period, we're going to be able to find, hopefully be able to find that the females had a litter of kittens, and there's a good chance if we have access to the property that we can find that den, within a week of those kittens being born, um, which allows us to to determine how many kittens she's had and then kind of follow their lives to see how many of them survive. We're able to place cameras out. Let's see if this video works. If it doesn't, we'll go on. There's no sound to worry about, but just see if this is playing. This was a female P39 who had we followed her for over 3 years. Well, about 3 years actually. And in the 3 years, she had 4 litters of cubs. Now, that's pretty unusual, you know. And the reason is that she kept losing those litters of cubs that she had. So this was her third litter that we got. So she had, P39 to me is kind of um, Her story is not an uncommon one, unfortunately. I mean, we've seen this time and time again on the project, and one of her first litter of cubs didn't make it to more than 6 months old. She bred again. She had another litter of um, cubs, and within a month, they'd been killed by another predator. We believe that it was a female mountain lion that went into the den and killed and ate them. Um, Her next litter, which was this one over here, um, none of those survived older than 5.5 months. She then bred one more time. She had another three. And well, you know, she was able to bring these two of them up. One of them died early on. She brought two of them up to dispersal age. But before they dispersed from her, she and possibly, we're not sure about it, but she was shot by a landowner for killing a sheep. And we believe that one of the cubs was also shot. And we think that out of 13 cubs in the 3 years, that possibly only one cub has survived to dispersal age, which just goes to show that these cats have a really rough time here. So that's just in the first sort of 12 to 18 months of their lives. Once they get to that age, when they disperse from their mum, so this is an example of a young male whose mom, P12, was in the Bennett Valley, Taylor Mountain area of Santa Rosa. Um, we caught him just before he just like before he left the area completely, but he was a young dispersal male, and we tracked him going all the way up into Lake County, wandering around and doing all sorts of things, and he ended up going all the way down to Marin and Point Reyes, which is just incredible to see this journey that he was sort of cruising around. He went down to Tiburon, to the Tiburon Peninsula, and all the way down to the Golden Gate Bridge even. This was an image of one of the locations that he was at, um, or what it would have looked like for him from that location um, near the Golden Gate Bridge. Unfortunately, he didn't have a fast track pass, so he didn't make it over. Headed back north, and kind of got to this dead end, which is a fascinating story in itself, is that these cats can't go any further when they're coming from the north, and then headed back up north and eventually was shot by a landowner in the Bodega region, in the sort of West Sonoma County region. So we tracked him for 1,400 miles, and we were able to find, out what he was feeding on, all the things that he was doing, and the five sheep, unfortunately, were right at the end of that period that we'd been tracking him, and were his downfall because of that conflict or that situation, killing unprotected livestock, led to his demise. So so essentially, we've a lot of our work is centered around trying to ensure that people learn to coexist with mountain lions. We know, for example, that they like areas with dense habitat, vegetation. We know that they can jump 15 feet. So if you put your animals in an enclosure with 5 foot or 8 foot or even 10 foot fencing around, well, it's not going to stop a mountain lion from getting in, right? It's it's the best thing to do to keep your animals safe is to have them in a full enclosure. And this is an example of a landowner that lost a sheep, and then I went out there and helped them out, and we ended up setting up using an existing structure. We just created a proper enclosure for the animals. One of the key things to note here is the non-permeable or see-through material around the enclosure. That is absolutely essential to avoid any visual stimulus for the cat, and also to ensure that the animals can't see out, your livestock can't see out. Otherwise, they'll get freaked out and sometimes do themselves a lot of, excuse me, damage inside the enclosure. We've also been working on something that has been used effectively in Africa for leopards and lions, African lions, and that is simply, and this Sonoma Land Trust, it also helped partner with us on this to allow us to set up one of these trial um, exclosures, if you like, or enclosure. But the use of shade cloth or weed barrier cloth or something like that, if you go 6 to 8 feet high around a fence and you create a full enclosure like this, um, it's it's it seems to be quite effective in keeping mountain lions from wanting to investigate and jump over into the enclosure. You'd obviously want to make sure that you don't do it right next to a tree that they can climb up if they want to, and kind of have an open area around there. But this is an example of a male mountain lion, P48, who um, on a property where a number of livestock had been killed on a regular basis, actually, eventually this weed barrier cloth was put up around the livestock, and he spent about 12 hours around on this property and didn't attempt to jump into the enclosure where the animals were, so they ended up being safe. So together with our partners, all hands ecology with Audubon Canyon Ranch previously, um, we developed a really cool brochure um, on how to coexist with mountain lions. This is a QR code which you can, if you're on your, and if you wanted to take a screenshot of that or a photograph of that, would allow you to download the brochure. And it provides some really good insight onto as to how one can coexist with mountain lions in our area. So we've been through a whole bunch of things, how challenging mountain lions find it living here. We've seen that over the course of the study, for the mountain lions that we've had collared, and we've collared 36 mountain lions, this is the percentage of mortality, the causes of mortality for 20 mountain lions out of the 36. And as you can see, depredation related incidents, where mountain lions kill livestock and then get killed as a result, and health reasons are the two key causes of mortality. We've had only one mountain lion that was collared that was struck by a car on the project. So it's nothing near as bad as in Southern California and in the Santa Cruz regions, where mountain lions um, are in fact, car strikes are second highest in causes of mortality for mountain lions in California because of the southern population incidents where they get hit by cars. Last year, with the health issues, we faced crazy situation where we had over 60% of the mountain lions in our study die from what we now know to be linked to feline leukemia virus. The cats died of bacterial bronchial pneumonia and various things like that, but it was as a result of their immune systems being compromised by feline leukemia virus. And um, the the way that they would get this would be from eating cats that were infected by feline leukemia virus. It's possible that they can that it can be transmitted between mountain lions once one mountain lion has got it. But overall, our population, we're still working on it at the moment to kind of figure out the extent of this. The trail camera work showed a very similar result, to see a drop in the number of mountain lion captures of over 50% lower over this period. But it's it was pretty extraordinary to see so many lions just dying as a result of this. And we're not sure whether we're out of the woods with this yet and what the extent of it is now, but we're just working on it, and it takes a lot of time and effort from pathologists and veterinarians and that to help us understand it. So P13 was the last cat, the main guy that we saw his range going over Highway 12, and he died in April, end of April last year, and he was the last cat to not make it as a result of this. But we've working, our project works really hard to work with communities using in situ data. I think it's one of the real benefits of this project is to be able to share real research and data from the area in which you're living um, to tell you what your mountain lions are doing, not sort of coming from some book or textbook or from what somebody else has written, but really sharing relevant information. And and it's good to see that there are some success stories. That at the moment P33, the female that's using the sort of Bennett Valley, Taylor Mountain, North Sonoma Mountain region. Um, she had a cub that was born in June last year, who has made it to dispersal age. So her daughter P50 um, was tagged earlier this year and dispersed from her mom a couple of months ago. And we're hoping to catch up with her sometime soon. But to make it to dispersal age is really quite a celebration, really. And then, you know, hopefully she'll make it to breeding age, which means that, for the next year or year and a half, um, she's going to be, kind of on her own and trying to make it in this really complex human-dominated landscape. Um, and yeah, I hope that you know that our work is having an impact. And I think that the really um, the work with children that Odawan Canyon Ranch or All Hands Ecology do, and the program that they have, I think is something which has a really big impact. Children really do seem to respond well to the importance of nature and learning about how valuable it is to have these animals here. So hopefully together we can kind of make this all work. So these are thanks to our partners that we work with. So thank you very much.
So, we have a plethora of questions from the audience. So many good questions and so many things that you talked about that we all want to know more about. So I'm going to try as much as I can to get through as many of these as possible. Um, so, uh, one question. So I'll kind of try to start from toward the beginning of the presentation. Uh, there was a question when you were talking about the Pleistocene era big cats that were in our area. Uh, so one of the participants is asking, how recently was there another big cat in Sonoma County?
Um, I guess it must have been sort of between a 10 and 12,000 year ago period. Jaguars are the only other big cat that occur in North America. Very few of them really sort of make it up into the New Mexico, Arizona area, coming over from the northern part of Mexico. But the big cats, the saber-toothed cats and American lion and those guys would have died off probably somewhere between 10 and 12,000 years ago. I'm not really sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then you also showed us when you showed us the overlay of where your data points for the mountain lions were and how they aligned with all of the forested and vegetated areas. So there's a question here about the different kinds of land covers, whether you're looking at, conifer forest, mixed hardwood, chaparral. Are you do you have yeah, do you know what their preference is, or is it just any kind of vegetative cover?
Yeah. So um, It's quite a fascinating question because we're grappling with this at the moment. The That proxy may be an oversimplification now, especially because of um, the reaction to the fires that we've had in 2017 and 2020, in the removal of understory or ladder fuel in our areas. Essentially, the vegetation that mountain lions are looking for. I mean, they're looking for cover, not overhead cover, but lower brush type cover, for in order to be able to remain undetected. So in coniferous forests, if you don't have that sort of understory cover, maybe the large trees help a mountain lion be able to navigate through, when stalking prey, hiding behind trees and that sort of thing. They'll do it in desert areas where they use rocks or the rugged topography allows for cats to move through areas without trees. But one of the interesting things in our area now is seeing how initially where we would use this proxy of cover, the green, dark green stuff, a lot of the properties that we go onto here in Sonoma County, when we get to the property, it's like, well, you've got tree canopy, but a lot of the understory has been removed either um, through physical removal, cutting it out, or by adding, mountain lion attractants, if you like, goats on the
Mm.
landscape who are grazing and browsing, sheep, and then prescribed burns are the other thing. Our concern, and we're looking at doing a study on this, is that if this key understory habitat is being removed permanently on an ongoing basis by landowners, we're essentially removing key habitat for multiple species, including bears, quail, all sorts of different species that could be needing that understory vegetation. Um, the So that's something that we'd like to look into more and have a better understanding of.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's mostly thicker, like shrubby or anything that gives them cover, essentially, that mountain lions really like.
Right. Makes sense. Thank you. So, on a related note, then you showed the Mark West Creek and the vegetation line along Mark West Creek and how the mountain lion appeared to be using that vegetation to cross through the city. And it makes me think of the mountain lion that we found at the mall in downtown Santa Rosa some years back, and it seems like um, that mountain lion was probably following, Matanzas Creek or something, and then the creek goes underground, and then what? Then what? It
Yeah.
becomes disconnected. So I'm just wondering about, I guess, observations or ideas around. Can we make passageways through these urban areas that would allow the animals to get through without, kind of getting into trouble?
Well, I think that, that's the ideal thing, is to ensure that there's connectivity in the landscape. And the creeks are one of the most important avenues or highways for wildlife. Um, those are key areas to focus on, particularly when moving through perturbed areas. It's different when you've got areas with habitat and you're kind of looking at how those areas might be fragmented in a different way. But yeah, when you've got like these residential areas and that, yeah, the creeks are the one key area. Look, mountain lions on a population level, they remain, it appears that they can be pretty easily connected in the North Bay. Once you go north around Healdsburg, for example, you'll see that it's easier for them to get from around from the east, for example, and say from Napa across and around to the west part of Sonoma, if they go that route. Um, Trying to get across, anywhere lower down becomes quite challenging. Um, and, the Sonoma Developmental Center, for example, is a good example where, looking at if there are going to be any developments, make sure that there's a significant buffer around the creek that allows wildlife to be able to move on there. Like the main connection between the Mayakima Mountain region and Sonoma Mountain is actually Stewart Creek, for example, which is like the key place for wildlife around Arnold Drive. That area is where habitat is most closely connected, um, is where the animals can get around. But yeah, those creeks, and you're quite right about the Santa Rosa cat going down Santa Rosa Creek and ending up at Macy's Mall.
Hmm. Um, so then, getting into the mountain lion and what they eat and how they eat. So, there's a question about how often do mountain lions eat and how long can they go between meals? You described that it might take them 3 or 4 days to get through a deer kill. And also, uh, why do they leave their kills during the day and go a distance a ways from them, rather than staying nearby? So if you could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah. So the consumption rates depend on a bunch of things. I mean, one, these are solitary cats. Mountain lions, like leopards and jaguars, are solitary cats. Uh, However, that said, it's very seldom that you'll find a female without some kind of accompanying mountain lion, which would be her offspring. So if you see two or three or four mountain lions together, it is almost certainly a mom and her offspring. And sometimes her offspring can be as big or even bigger than her for that matter. A male offspring that is being lazy and doesn't want to disperse yet can end up hanging around for a year and a half or more with mum, can end up being bigger than mum. Um, the only other time you see mountain lions together would be like if a male and female are mating, and then sometimes they share kills. But we're finding out some very interesting stuff about them. But suffice it to say, it's normally mom and the youngsters. So if it's one on its own, so it's a male moving around on his own, um, or a female who doesn't have young yet at a time, they could spend 3 or 4 days on an adult deer, and sometimes even longer. If it's in winter, especially, and they're just taking their time feeding, they can spend 5, 6 days on a fully grown buck or something like that. Um, but if you've got 3 or 4 cats together, bigger offspring, then the consumption rate goes up and they'll finish it off quicker. So the more cats there are, the quicker it gets consumed. And that's often a way that we can actually tell how many cats are or have been feeding on a carcass is by the consumption rate. We look at the age of the deer and then how long it took for the mountain lion to consume it, and then we can assume that it wasn't on its own at the time. Um, the other question was why they leave. Um, well, I mentioned about mountain lions being timid animals, right? Early on in the presentation. And this is just reinforces this idea that mountain lions are not your characteristic aggressive apex predator. They're they're scared is essentially why they're not at the kill. They don't want to hang around there because if if you think about it, it's one of the times that they're most likely, most susceptible to being um, attacked by one of their imaginary ancestors or a bear for that matter. So in some areas where you've got an overlap of bears and mountain lions, you can have up to 90% of mountain lion kills kleptoparasitized by bears. So they can be stolen by bears. So if the mountain lion's hanging out at the kill, all the time, then it has this risk of being caught out. So moving off during the day gives it time to just lie up somewhere away from the kill and not be disturbed. In areas where the wolves would also maybe scavenge these kills or be a problem to mountain lions.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So, you kind of told some heart-wrenching stories about the mountain lions that didn't survive. And so we have someone who's asking about if it's illegal for landowners to shoot and kill a mountain lion. And if it's not illegal, how can we get laws passed to make it illegal?
Yeah, look, it has become more difficult at the at the moment there has been, there've been changes in policy which make it a bit more difficult to get a permit to kill a mountain lion. A few years back, it was incredibly easy to get a permit to kill a mountain lion. At the moment, um, in in Southern California or south of San Francisco, really, it's even more difficult because the population's considered more threatened there. But in our area, even here, usually it takes, a couple of incidents on the same property before a lethal permit might be issued. So if you have a loss, then the recommendations should be that the landowner does something to protect his animals. And then if he has a subsequent loss soon after that, then you know, um, it might be that they can get a permit after two or on the third time or something like that. But the other thing is that if you find a mountain lion attacking one of your animals, there is something called the encounter rule, which allows the landowner to shoot the cat if it's actually in the act of attacking livestock. And then that is if everything, with an investigation shows that that's what happened, then a retrospective permit would be issued, a kill permit would be issued. Um, we are not sure with the P39 case. We It may be that is being is under investigation at the moment because can't really get any more information on what happened there.
Mhm.
So law enforcement may be investigating that case.
It seems like you're doing a lot of work to proactively inform landowners of how they can avoid these kinds of confrontations with the mountain lions. And then also you're sharing your stories and the data that you're collecting. Um, Do you ever actively try to intervene if you see that there is something that might be an issue or a problem? Like, for example, the mountain lion that was hiding just behind someone's house while it was feeding on a kill. Like, do you ever go in and say, hey, there's this, just be aware. You might not want to go in your backyard for a few days, or in the case of the mountain lion that you knew all the different things that he ate along the way, but then he got to the end and he ate five sheep, and that was, I'm wondering if if you ever, yeah, if you ever see something happening and then actually intervene in real time.
Well, typically not. There are certain circumstances where we may, particularly if we have been in contact with landowners before and there's a situation where we're aware of, which may help, but it's really difficult to to do. We've been asked by the department not to reach out to landowners when there are wildlife interactions or interactions with mountain lions, sort of conflict type interactions. So um, we we rely on the public contacting us. So if something like this happens, if a neighbor calls and says, "Listen, there's been something," then we request that they speak to their neighbor and get the person to call us,
Mm.
so that we're not actually stepping on anyone's toes. It also, you know, with such an incredibly densely human dominated area, we don't know who we're dealing with and whether somebody's going to go out there and shoot the cat, for example, or end up in a dangerous situation with a cat, something like that, which could be so where we have no control over that once we've actually shared that information. The other thing is just the practicalities of when we actually get the data. So we don't actually get real-time data from these collars very often. Mostly, the collars are programmed to take these points, every 2 hours, and then they're supposed to send us points at least once a day, but sometimes we might not get data for 2 or 3 days. Um, so the cat's already been to a place, and there's nothing we can do about it. So we can't forewarn people, for example. It's also, if the cat turns left and goes 2 miles off in a different direction, we would have to notify another 2,000 landowners. You know, it's hopelessly um, like impractical, and it's incredibly challenging working in an area where there's just simply so many people living in mountain lion habitat.
Mhm. Um, so the audience is asking, how many mountain lions do you estimate in Sonoma County currently?
Well, currently, I would not want to venture a guess, but before a couple of years before, like we'd worked on a statewide analysis looking at mountain lion um, uh, densities across the state, and based on our research and looking at our particular area, we would expect there to be about 75 mountain lions in Sonoma County, and that would include younger cats um, as well. So not just territorial adults, but younger cats too. Um, that would be within good mountain lion habitat, but with the health issues that we've had in the population, you know, it could be half the population now. But we hope that things are changing and they're kind of moving back into the area again.
Mm-hmm. So we have someone who is wondering about what kind of cameras that you're using to track mountain lions, and if property owners could also use those kind of cameras and help support your studies.
Yeah, the trail cameras, Audubon Canyon Ranch or All Hands Ecology now have got a fantastic trail camera program. It's something we set up in 2018. Um, and the idea was really, looking at citizen science and giving landowners the opportunity of being part of a project, but also for their own personal interest to kind of see who their wild neighbors are wandering around on their properties. And I think it's an awesome project to be a part of. Those data are contributing to our, we're looking at a bigger data set of kind of getting a better sense of presence, absence, and relative abundance of different species in different areas. Um, but yeah, um, that's a program on all hands ecology on their website that you would be able to pick up there with the trail camera project, and they have a team that then set the cameras up and manage the cameras, um, and those data go towards the study. Alternatively, you get your own camera, set it up yourself, or a few cameras. They're not very expensive, um, and um, and do it that way. What is interesting is the perception from the public that mountain lion numbers have gone up significantly over the last few years because people keep seeing them mostly on security cameras, ring cameras, doorbell cameras, and trail cameras. And And really, the most logical explanation, based on our research is that what's happened is that, you know, mountain lions are being detected significantly more by these tools that weren't around 10 years ago. So mountain lions were always walking on your porch or hanging out by your hot tub or whatever. But we weren't detecting them because we were sleeping and whatever. But now we've got ring cameras, we've got doorbell security cameras, and we've got all sorts of things that are being these observers, um, which get so many more detections.
Mhm. So we have someone who says that they live in the forest, they walk in the dense forest. They're wondering if they're safe given the shyness of the mountain lions.
Well, the well, they're safer than getting in their car and going to the store. Um, that's guaranteed. They're safer than, at risk of walking around and being struck by lightning. Um, so, whether you can get attacked by a mountain lion, yes, you may be attacked by a mountain lion, but the chances are so incredibly insignificant that I don't think that it's something that one should you know, be that afraid of doing at all. Mountain lion attacks are so unbelievably rare, um, and and really, it's not something that one should be afraid of. But it's good to know what to do if you encounter a mountain lion. Most people will never encounter a mountain lion in their lives when walking, but the one key thing is never run from a mountain lion. Stand your ground. You can slowly back away. It depends on where you see it. I like walking with a stick just because it's something, you can use for balance to ensure that you can hike safely. But it could also be used to wield in a situation. For example, if you're like a threatening situation and you've got a better chance of wielding it against like a human that's giving you trouble rather than a mountain lion. But um, you know, at a distance like over 50 yards or something like that, seeing a mountain lion, I don't think it's necessary to go waving your arms around and shouting at it because it wouldn't know why you're doing that. Um, you can maybe just enjoy the sighting and enjoy that experience, or you could maybe talk to it so that it knows that you're around. Um, but if you come into close proximity and you can see that there's intent from the mountain lion, that there's something going on, that it's interested in you, that's when you kind of want to rely on the sort of making yourself look bigger, shouting at it, and maybe having a stick or stones or something like that. But these incidents are incredibly rare. I mean, I think that it's unfair on mountain lions to be talking about these like attacks and things like that when 4.5 million people get bitten by dogs in America every year. 750,000 people end up needing medical attention from dog bites in the USA every single year. Um, it's just, crazy to imagine the difference between, those levels of threat. So, but statistics don't always make people feel better about these things. It's good to know mountain lions are around, and it's good to be aware of your surroundings. When we out on safari in Africa, we do a lot of things like listening out for alarm calls of birds or other animals that have detected a mountain lion and make us aware that there's a predator around. Being aware of your surroundings is really important, anyway. But yeah, I wouldn't be, long story short, I wouldn't be too afraid.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Martins, for taking the time to share all of your amazing research and work with us and to try to help bridge those gaps between, these animals that most of us don't ever encounter in our lifetimes, and getting to know more about them and have developed some understanding, and knowing that we share this land with them. So we really appreciate your taking the time to speak with us this evening.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Bye.